take a bit of the pressure off and just get, if this works better, we'll go with this format.
Yeah.
Right, we're live. So welcome anybody
so
out there.
Live on the Tuesday the 10th of January 2017. Happy New Year, mate.
Yeah, Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to everyone out there who may look at this in the future or right now.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a hot week in the press in regards to political issues. Plenty to talk about.
Yeah, it's been exciting. Oh, it looks like Francois joining us as well, the party leader.
Our party leader has made his way to the Chinwag. Welcome, Francois.
How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Very good, thank you very much. I made it. I'm very happy.
We're happy too. I'm sure everybody else is going to be happy that you're on as well, mate. You're a bit of an enigma. Most people don't even know you exist.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to be as invisible as possible. I'm always on the phone though. What are you guys chatting about?
Well, we've just gone live.
We're just starting.
So we've shared the link to the Facebook page. We're just there's currently no one viewing, but this will go to our YouTube channel in the background once we're finished. Just going to discuss a couple of the hot topics in the press this week. Probably the Sussan Ley or Sussan Ley issue, and the abuse of parliamentary funding. And I guess that's where we can start.
Perfect. Well,
who's going to go?
I think that she said that pretty much everything she was doing was quite legal, so it's not really out of the way.
And that's the thing. That's the thing I find with this sort of thing, not just in politics, but in modern life in general. People classify things as, it was legal. Yeah, it was legal, but was it right? Was it morally right? Was it ethical? Would it, coming from a police background, would it withstand the public scrutiny, which is something that we got drilled into us every day? Would what you are doing withstand public scrutiny? And you had to ask every step of the way that question. With every action you did, with every report you wrote, with every conversation you had, would this withstand public scrutiny? And if they say yes, totally out of touch. If they say no, then why did they do it? So, they're screwed either way. It shows a blatant disregard for their position and the public in general.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to consider that if you pay for flights to go and do personal business, even if there was some form of government work involved on such a short trip, it must have crossed her mind that she probably couldn't claim it. There's really no doubt that she must have considered it at some point, that it's a lot of money to be spending to go and buy a flat on the Gold Coast, and regardless of what government duty she was on, she knew good and well she was going to conduct personal business as part of it. Being the not only time that she's done it, it's not the first time. It's been brought up that she's repeatedly done not quite illegal, but not quite very on the very blurring the lines, so to speak. Yeah,
and I suppose it comes down to if you're surrounded by people who are constantly walking that line, who are constantly balancing what's right and what's illegal, you lose touch with reality, and you sort of go, well, what am I allowed to do, as opposed to what should I be doing? And she would have, I've got no doubt that she would have been asking around going, well, maybe not this instance, but to this, am I allowed to do this? And everybody goes, yeah, that's fine. We do it all the time. Not a problem at all. Oh, okay. So, after years of doing that, I'm sure that you just get fairly blasé and go, oh, well, this is obviously how it works. And it's at that point that you either, you have to question why they're still there, because that's not what we put them there for.
And now, do you know why she didn't take a chopper?
Say that again?
Do you know why she didn't take an helicopter?
Why is that?
I don't know yet. But
maybe the helicopters are a bit of a hot topic. They try and avoid helicopters now. They thought it was mode of travel, not cost of travel. They go, oh no, they don't like it when we take helicopters. We'll take a plane instead. That'll be
private
fine,
jet.
isn't it? It's fine. Yeah, that's all right.
So,
okay.
Because I read also a little comment I actually heard a little bit of a Brownwind Bishop on the topic. But it's the socialist. It's probably the same.
Yeah.
Socialists, they might come from Russia. They're probably associated to Trump.
Yeah, and that's what I reckon. It's it's a classic US play, isn't it? It's the communists, it's the socialists, it's the it must have been when she said that, the back of her head must have been going, it's the Russians, but I can't blame the Russians because the Russians don't care about Australia. So it's just it's disgusting and a joke. The whole of Australia, if not, other parts of the world, is just sitting back having a good old laugh at Australian politics. And I think America, US must look at us and go, well, at least we're not the only ones that have buggered this up, because we're in some serious trouble here. I
think it's a global concern, though, Chris. I read the French news too. They're quite good at it too. However, I won't change the subject, but
I think I think one thing that we've got in our favour is the fact that we're so connected. A lot of this stuff would have gone through without question in the past. However, now because records are so readily accessible and communication is so easy to access, this sort of news travels like lightning, and the window of opportunity for the government to make it vague and complicated is shrinking. And apart from obviously having mainstream media on their side to really soften the blow, they are struggling to bury all of the problems that are coming up. Not even daily now. It's more like an hourly thing at this point in time. Every hour there's another revelation of some sort of corruption or questionable behaviour. It's quite incredible.
Just as a throw to the side, this week we've introduced a tool on the Polyweb that allows us to look through last year's parliamentary expenses, and if you take a look at the graph, what we're seeing from Sussan Ley and a number of others, it's across the board. There's no, yes, there's probably a few at the back end that don't do it, and they're probably the only honest ones amongst a very blasé bunch of people that are quite happy to charge the taxpayer for just about anything in a slight relation to government business. You happen to say you talk politics at a party, so all of a sudden that became a government business venture. So they bill us for it, and it's become commonplace. Like Francois said, it's an everyday occurrence. It's not just an isolated instance.
Yeah, it's business as usual.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the thing. They are running it like a business. So when you're running a business, you go, okay, well, how do I draw the most amount of money out of the situation in which I'm in? Now, what the politicians, I believe, are struggling with is the concept that it's not about them making money. It's about them actually finding those efficiencies for the Australian people. So they're asking the wrong question. Instead of sitting there going, how do we get the most out of this for Australia? They sit there and go, how do we get the most out of this for ourselves? And you know, that just indicates to me that we have the wrong people in government. These people aren't geniuses by any stretch of the mind. They are extremely overpaid, well connected, and some of them are very well off. Sheep, you know, they do as they're told. They've got the dogs that are barking at their heels telling them what to do, and they just respond to command. And you know, people are getting sick of it. I truly hope that in the next election, people, you know, this last stint of government, people have just gone, you know what, we're done. We're definitely going to move away from the major parties. I mean, we've seen it for the last 2 elections. We've seen a massive movement away from the majors towards the minors. And I think what we're doing now, what we're seeing now is one of the last nails in the coffin. I would hope, I really hope that people are seeing this for what it is and just going, you know what, this is they're bloody clowns.
Well, it's on its way, Chris. You know, you watch the elections, you watch the Brexit. The people out, whether they wanted it or understood it or not, they just wanted to express their disregard for the politics. They didn't really even. I don't believe that they really wanted to have an opinion. Oh, also on the same matter on the Brexit, which is quite mad, is that if you rerun the referendum, the switch would be, you know, probably 75 to 25% because of the abstentions of the thing. However, in the Trump situation, there's also, you know, it shows that the people do no longer want that bipolarship, that bipartisanship of politics between the left, the right, the liberals, the conservatives, the Labour, and, you know.
Yeah. I totally agree. You know, I love that Brexit. I love, although, you know, Trump is questionable, I love the fact that the American people have you know, gone, you know what, we're not going to go with the flow on this one. I mean, sure, the outcomes have been questionable, but also what it does is it provides people with the opportunity to go, okay, well, we do have the power to obviously influence certain things. Next time we're going to think a little bit harder about it because this time we were just, you know, voting with our feet. But also what I find fascinating is that governments or the system, the institution sees a lot of these occurrences and they see them as not beneficial to the current situation. And, you know, you've got all of these rallies against Trump over in the US. You've got myriads of protests against the Brexit. And also not only that, but the concerted effort of the establishment to find some way constitutionally or legally to reverse that Brexit. Saying, yes, well, we told you that you could decide, but you made the wrong decision, so we'll decide for you. What is that? You know, how is that even possible? You can't lay down the responsibility of the people and say, look, we trust that you're going to make the right decision, and by the right decision we mean the decision that we want you to make. And if you don't make the right decision, we're going to reverse that and make the decision for you. You know, what is that? That is totalitarianism, you know, by default. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Let the people make decisions, let the people make mistakes, and let them continue to do it, because it's the only way that we're going to get involved. We need to make mistakes. We need to learn from our mistakes.
Next time they vote, they try to have an informed vote. So they try. Hopefully, people will try to inform themselves.
Exactly right.
They vote because it's drama.
And you know, when people go up and say, we can't trust you to make the right decisions, so we're not going to let the people, you know, make decisions anymore. And if people are sitting there feeling that they're not going to make the right decisions, let's go back to Sussan Ley, or Ley, or however you want to pronounce her last name. Let's question how many of those decisions are correct. Let's question the ability for these people that are in charge to make the correct decisions on our behalf. And, you know, I invariably come up with the result that, you know what, I'll trust my own decision-making process above and beyond any of these elected representatives, especially if I'm well informed. If I'm well informed, if I'm well read, I read about it, I'm well educated, I will make the best decision for myself. Thank you very much. And I will trust any of you guys to make the best decision for me as well, because I know that, you know, we're coming from the same place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's it. I think that trust in the people's been lost. Like, we've lost ourselves as far as trusting ourselves to make those decisions. Like, we've let the representatives do it for so long that it's become habitual to sort of let them keep going. And it's like, oh, well, they are not doing any good, let's vote in the other mob. But the reality is that we're only voting in the same people every time because they only have specific intentions in mind, party lines and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can see that, you know, the division of the people that's occurring at the moment, black, white, you know, you've got there's Muslims, there's Christians, there's Jews, there's all this sort of stuff that's coming out all over the web that I haven't seen for, well, most of my life. You know, it's just come back in the last 12 to 18 months. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it, but there's a massive amount of negative and divisive talk and chatter on the net, which is basically, I think, just designed to really build fear of our fellow man and distract us from the people who we should actually be working against, as opposed to who we are. And, you know, I see that every day and I just go, what a load of shit. That is just purely, you know, I look at my circle of friends, I would trust them to make a decision for me any day compared to the establishment that we have in at the moment with all their mates, all their billion-dollar, trillion-dollar mates. You know, I've got a very diverse range of friends, and it doesn't matter where they are, what colour they are, where they're from, their heritage. They're just bloody good people.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Divide and rule is the thing behind it. So, well, let's not be too.
Divide and conquer. That's exactly what's happening at the moment, and we can't let them do it. And you know, they're struggling at this point in time to achieve it, I believe. And we need to keep that heat up. You know, we will not be divided. Not going to happen.
Absolutely. Very good.
It's certainly ripe at the moment for change.
Yeah, well, I think that people are really looking for a leader, a true leader. The problem is that any true leader that stands up is cut down instantly by MSM. Vicious rumours are spread, lies are spread, and that does enough to plant the seed of doubt in people's mind who are already primed with fear to not trust in a leader. And I suppose that then means that the onus comes back to each individual to get back in the game. You know, don't rely on people to lead you, lead yourself. Read, look at what's going on, develop an understanding of the world that surrounds you, and get involved.
And don't be afraid to take the blinkers off and consider things outside the box, because the same lies have been spread for so long. Like, I think the old saying is, you know, it's easier to believe that lie than it ever would be to swallow the truth, because it's been told for so long. Now, on the topic of fear, the Centrelin issue is probably a key aspect of maintaining that attack on people, like to keep up. Oh, you know, now everyone's a criminal because they've, you know, received an overpayment from Centrelin, and they're feeling persecuted because of debt collection proceedings and all the rest of it. But it sort of ties in with the government's totally either out of touch with people in general to sort of push a system in such a way, or it's part of another agenda, and that agenda may be simply to keep people pushed down, and it's maybe not as bad as other countries, but in a form of oppression of the lower classes.
Yeah, look, I think that people who are already in a victim state of mind, who are then hit with a please explain or a bill or some other form of pressure by the system, it may be that does them over the edge. And all it does is lead to a further victim state, a further fear state, a further feeling of oppression, a further feeling that the government is not on their side, is not working for them, that they are actually working for the system. And that is bullshit. The system is there in order to provide for the Australian people, first and foremost, and the system needs a reality check. It needs to be bashed back into shape, and it needs to be, this whole pyramid that we've got going on at the moment, where the people are supporting the system, and the system is in place by the politicians and the financial elite. It's all ass about face. The system is there to serve us. The politicians are there to serve us, and they need to be reminded of it.
Yeah, I tell people regularly that government's positions change. Like when it was formulated, it was meant to be the people's representatives ran the country on behalf of the majority, and that they would look after the interests of that majority. But what we see now is that elite minorities who have enough money, sway and power and control over the media control a much larger slice of that government control. And so therefore the people as a majority lose out entirely to, like you said, this elite financial sector who can afford to pay their way for the government to do their bidding. What we need to see is the relaxation of the interconnectedness of government and corporation. Like there needs to be a break. The government needs to stand on its own and stop relying so heavily on corporations to do most of its bidding, and also the money that is put into play because of corporations needs to be reviewed and taken into account, that you don't receive $1 million donations and expect nothing in return. Like there's strings attached, and even though it mightn't be part of parliamentary privilege for all of us to hear what those strings are, we can be sure that they're in place.
Can't wait for the $1 million donations. I said I can't wait for the $1 million donations. Oh no, it's not for.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of that. See, that's the thing. Like that's what happens is we exist within this system, and this system means that we need to compete with these people, these parties who have millions of dollars, and personally, in excess of billions of dollars, I'm led to believe. So realistically, we are competing on an uneven playing field. So trying to even engage in any kind of competition or any kind of combat, we will get crushed by their wallets overnight, basically. So what needs to be happened is the playing field, like John just said, the playing field needs to be even, so that everybody has an equal opportunity for an equal say and equal representation, if the people choose for them to do so. At the moment, you only have limited exposure and limited opportunity when compared to the major stakeholders. And that's, I mean, to say it's unfair, it seems a little soft. What it is dangerous, irresponsible, and it's going to lead us even further down this path of injustice, I suppose. And again, something's got to be done to that. But, you know, we've got to take a bit of that blame for ourselves, sitting back and sitting on our hands and trying to trust the system to look after us, whilst these magnates never sit on their hands. They're always out there. How do we get more power? How do we get more money? They're always working the system. How do we work this situation? How do we get there? How do we, you know, they never sleep. That drive never ends for them. And all we want is a system that looks after us. And as soon as we feel that the system's starting to do that, we start to relax, because we think that we've got it, and we're happy about that. And we're, you know, we don't have that drive. And we've got to realise that a fair democracy is something that we've always got to work for. We've always got to protect it. We've always got to maintain it. And a democracy is nothing without us.
I was trying to joke about the $1 million donations. It didn't trigger too many smiles, but no, I completely agree with you guys. And I think, and I try to pass the message on anyway, that, yeah, politics have to be an organic thing. Everything grows. You know, if something is, the wrong decision is being taken, well, let's modify it in the future. That's not what, and that's our role as constituents in the society, to take care of ourselves, not believing to the representatives that we have elected. And yeah, hopefully a lot of people will come and join. And well, there is a lot of people already. Yeah, an organic system where you can change things as they grow is the most important, I would say.
I suppose it could go back to what we were talking about before, where if we realise that the politicians work for us, if this was an organisation, we would have to be on top of our employees. Otherwise, they sort of, without guidance, without any kind of oversight, often they will just end up doing whatever they want. And that is particularly the case here. You know, we haven't been keeping an eye on our politicians. You know, once every 4 years we get a chance to judge them, and then once they're in, we let them go off and do whatever they want. And then all of a sudden they think that they're in charge, when actually, you know what, just because we haven't been paying attention for the last 30 years, yeah, that's not true. So we need to get that back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's really only a minor mindset shift by the people. It's not a major change in reality, because if people think, if they believe there's a democracy currently, then they believe that they have somewhat of a say over the bearing of the country. It's just getting them to realize that that little bit of bearing has gotten out of control, and sort of the current mob and the previous 10 lots of them have sort of manipulated what you've said, that complacency that we've let them do whatever they want for so long, that's just the way it is now. And it's I think that's why the odd party has something that, you know, it is just people. It's representing yourself to that extent, you know. It's just, it's not, we're not rich pioneers of, you know, or what is, you know, billionaires with money in the Cayman Islands. We're just people who live ordinary everyday lives, who are interested in the outcome of what's going on. And we've just awoken a little early and gone, hang on, you know, this is going on, and everyone else needs to wake up and realize that unless the people stand up and take that authority back in a passive within the law way, then we can only stand by and say, well, it was our fault when it all goes to shit. Pardon the French.
Yeah. I don't know. Is that French, Francois? I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not French.
That hurt. Good on you.
Yeah. No, I agree. It is. It's about, and I think that, and we've discussed this before in the past. It's about making sure that people are taught about the Constitution, about Australian politics at an early stage in life, so that when they leave school and they become, they turn old enough to actually vote, they know what the heck is going on. They don't just sit there and go, okay, hey, Mum, what are you voting for? Or, hey, Dad, what are you voting for? Because I'll just vote for that because I've got no idea what any of this means. A lot of the people that we talk to, they have no idea. The younger people, they don't believe that there is any other party apart from the Labor and Liberal and some, sometimes the Greens. And they think that the minor parties is something totally different to the major parties. They operate in a different sphere. And that's concerning. That is the fundamental basis of the environment in which they are going to spend every day of their life, if they remain in Australia, between now and the day that they die. It's definitely one of the most important things that they could probably learn. That and taxation and the things that you actually need to live. Those are the sorts of things we need to teach at school.
Come on, youth. Educate.
Yeah, well, the older generations, the baby boomers, have had their chance and they buggered it up. So we really need to get the younger people up to speed so that they can fend for themselves when all of us old farts die off.
Well, clearly, if you look at the comparison, say, a lot of people would go, oh, politics isn't the kind of subject that you can teach objectively within the school environment. But I would say, well, neither's religion, but that gets taught to kids from the time that they're 5 years old. Why don't we take as much interest in our own well-being and our own existence and our own facilities that facilitate our existence on Earth as seriously as, as religion is taken? I'm not saying anything against either, but it's on the same playing field. Politics should be fundamentally part of our basic education structure. Like, it should be as important as reading and writing, understanding the implications of political decisions on the outcomes of the future. Because a child in kindergarten today is only 20 years away from being a member of society and at a full functioning level. And if it takes them another 20 years to grasp politics simply because it was completely ignored through their schooling, well, it's too late by the time they realize that something's gone wrong for it to be corrected. And that's, why it's so important to bring it back to a school level. Totally agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just saw that you've got to leave us there, Francois.
I do. I apologize. However, it's the first one I come onto, and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to make sure that we're present every week.
Excellent.
I will polish my French for you, Chris.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, that was for you, John. But yeah. I'll definitely do that. Good to speak to you guys.
You work on your French and I'll work on my English, and we'll never be able to understand a thing we say.
What we do is we do things like FFS or things like that. You don't really say.
Yep. That's why we got the text.
Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
See ya.
Yeah, look, what you were saying before, something that I reflect on often, you look at Wyatt Roy, who was the youngest elected member of Parliament in the history of Australia, elected to Parliament at 20. Now, he wasn't taught any of that at school. He wasn't taught anything that enabled him to get into that position of power at school. His father was a politician. So he was schooled and trained in politics by his family. Now, if that isn't a concern, I don't know what is. That's just leading nepotism. That's just leading straight down the path of the American system, where you look at all the Bushes and then the Clinton. Surely in America there is more than two families fit to run the country. How does that make sense to anybody? It blows my mind that people think that just because, or the system allows that the families to control the system so much. It defies logic.
Well, if you take a look at the Clinton and Trump gene tree, you'll actually find that there is a connection between the two families, just by chance in the background there. A few pages removed.
Yeah, I do tend to look at things like that, and I think, well, if we look far enough back in everybody's history, generally you'll find some pretty amazing, and you could look at them as somewhat nefarious, nefarious links. You know, I think way back I've got a great-great-grandfather or something like that that's an admiral of the fleet for England. So, you know, if you look at it like that, you know, I should be rolling in coin, and you know, I should be in charge of battalions, but it's not exactly how it works. You know, one foul move by one of your stupid relatives, distant relatives, and you might as well be related to a wombat. But yeah, no, it's there's certainly links there. Yeah, for all of the politicians who have been in power, especially in the US.
Yeah, it's strange to see the amount of contention around the US election with the way it panned out in the end, and how it set a new mood across the entire planet, which is it's the first time, I guess. I'm not sure because I wasn't alive during that pre-World War II era, just when things were starting to get tense and people realized there was something really, really wrong with the world, but what was going to be the fixing element, you know, where we're going to go to war or we're going to sort it out. And it's kind of, I guess, that kind of anticipation with Trump, based on his cabinet decisions and who he's got running with not running with him, but standing with him in office. It's a strange setup. It's just not your usual people.
I think the thing that sets us apart now, again, it goes back to what we were talking about before, is how connected we are and how much information we've got at our fingertips. Back, you know, with the World War and things like that, the propaganda machine was amazing. It was phenomenal. It really squashed almost all opponents to the elitist, the system. So everybody was sort of on board, whether they were begrudgingly on board or not. Whereas these days, we now have a massive amount of information that allows us to see how corrupt the government has been for, you know, the last at least 10, 15 years, how the wars have started, why the wars have started, how they've been perpetuated, how they've been fueled, who they've been fueled by, who's made the money out of it. And people are sitting back going, we've been well and truly screwed here. We've been lied to at every step of the way. And you know, and in the case of the US, they have a population that is so poor, so disadvantaged, that, you know, what have they got out of all those years of war? Oppression. They've got themselves oppression. Exactly what they thought they were fighting to save other countries from.
But I think that comes back to like what we were talking about earlier with our politicians getting carried away with their privilege. In America, you're seeing the same thing, except it's a much more militaristic privilege because they're such a larger country. They took on such a dominant role post-World War II that the power, they just seen it as a necessity to go around policing the rest of the world, putting themselves into situations that they probably, in a democratic way, should have had no part in. But also you've got the UN's play and how that all works together. And it's sort of like America became the sheriff that took it upon itself to sort of be, hey, look, I'm wrangling everyone in here and I'm going to sort it all out. But Helene forgot to look after the country back home. And now what you've got is like a war-torn country that's never seen a day of conflict on its own soil post the revolution.
The civil wars.
And it's like they've sort of depleted their own demise. But see, there's some commentators that say that's all part of the bigger plan, is to keep the major population oppressed to a point, to hold them So you can't move. You can't stand up and rise against any kind of corrupt system because you don't have the power or the means. You have to move in such massive numbers to make that kind of impact that they know it's just not physically possible for it to happen. But then, as a side point, when we do get up and going as people, we have the ability to change everything. And like we've seen that in Egypt, we've seen it all around the world over the eons. You know, it's happened time and time again. Empires fall because people have enough and go, no, we're not going to take it anymore, whether it be another race removes another race. But that's the premise. And that leads me to this whole fake news thing we've got going on at the moment, and talking about information exchange. It's almost like a play out of a playbook. You know, now we've got to discredit anything that's not mainstream media because we control the mainstream media, and therefore what we eat as far as, you know, our daily news and current affairs. If they attack alternative media and anything that's not mainstream is, oh, that's a lie, it puts doubt back in people's mind, because as much as you and I might feel we're awake to some of those realities, there's still many, many people that are far too busy in their day-to-day life and struggle to notice what's happened. They're caught up in the whirlwind, which is life on planet Earth. But it's sort of, like you said, it's snowballing to a point now. People, oh, look, this has been going on for so long. They were talking about these same issues in the 60s, and here we are in 2017. That's a big jump in time, and we're still covering those same basic, complex political issues that ruled the world back then as they do now. But like you said, we now have a tool that allows far more people to be aware. And once we'll get to a critical point where it just goes completely nuts, and everyone will all of a sudden feel like, how didn't I know this? You know, how didn't I see this happening around me? And that's where we're kind of at.
It's that adoption cycle. So you've got your early adopters and your what is it? Your pioneers, your early adopters, your I can't remember what it is, but it's the take up of new ideas and technology and things like that. We're at this little bit here. We haven't quite reached the really steep point yet where the massive amounts of people are starting to get on board, but it's certainly starting to happen. And even if people don't know exactly what's going on, people are certainly there going, right, I'm angry. They're not quite sure what they're angry about, and I think that's what mainstream media are feeding on at the moment. They're just throwing things at people going, you should be angry at this, be angry at this, and they're just like smoke bombs. They're just sort of, you know, just distracting everybody from what they should be angry about. And people eventually are going to get tired of that, and they're going to go, you know what? I'm pretty sure that the person who's throwing all this rubbish at me is probably going to be the person behind the main problems. And, you know, that is mainstream media. That is the current government. And, you know, all of these people who throw up, oh, these massive problems, these are massive concerns. And you look at some of these concerns and you go, you know what, that's nothing compared to the things that we should be concerned about. You know, rates of homelessness, suicide rates, domestic violence, all those sorts of things. They're massive issues. And how often do we hear about those? We don't. We hear about government corruption, which then gets led into an inquiry, which we never hear the outcome of. It's all just bullshit. And we need to sift our way through the bullshit and get to the real stuff.
It's the fanfare of bureaucracy. If they've got us,
absolutely.
Whatever they've got us looking at in the public eye means that there's something going on way over there in the distance that we shouldn't be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And that's the way they know. It's like internet marketers know the power of a clickbait headline. Like we've watched that happen over the last 5 or 10 years. The blooming politicians have been using that same mentality. They invented it.
Yeah.
Hey, look over there, there's a fire. Quick, shovel that money into this thing over here, so no one's watching.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to change. And I guess that's the point of our whole conversation is finding a way to make the people feel empowered enough to be the catalyst, to be the tipping point to say, well, shit, we've had enough. It can't go on. And, whether it's a popular people's movement, whether it's a popular political party movement, whether it's any kind of movement at all, if the people just rise up that little bit stronger, and we're seeing it, like some of the data that came out of the election poll that we ran this last couple of weeks, a lot of the people that voted One Nation or other, a lot of Liberal voters, because they note, I'd like to vote in their comments, I would have voted for Turnbull or the Liberals, but I can't stand Turnbull, that kind of thing. They're making such a mess of it. I don't know who else to vote for. And they're clutching at straws. It's like somebody out there's got to be different to the current system, and whether it be Pauline Hanson or Nick Xenophon or Natalia, I can never get his name right, from the Greens, whether they are the possible front runners of the new government that we may see arise, or whether we're going to just be stuck with this Labor-Liberal two-party preferred crap that has gone on for so long now that, well, the lines between the two parties are so blurred, they may as well be one party split in two, and we vote one in, and then we vote the other in, and then we vote the other in. There's no consistency between their objections for each other. Like, they'll backflip on their own decisions to go with the other side and then flip back the other way to support a different stance. It's just the same theatre every time you turn the bloody... Well, Question Time we just don't watch anymore because it makes me too cranky.
Yeah, and you might as well just be watching reruns. At the moment, I think that I actually turned on Question Time the other day, and it wasn't until halfway through, half an hour into it, I thought, hang on a second, this isn't Question Time, this is Yes Minister. So it's turned into a comedy. And it's time to change.
Well, Ricky Muir said in one of his posts just after he left Parliament, he said the show that they put on for the Australian people that we see on the cameras, on the mainstream media, and he said that is not the system, that is not the government, that is nothing like what's going on behind closed doors. And like, his eyes were well and truly open to the realities that, this is just a sideshow to the main act. The main act is this operating system that, well, he couldn't touch, and he was forced out of, more or less, let's change the rules to get rid of Ricky Muir kind of thinking as far as group ballots. But
I did read that. Yeah, I read that he said that behind closed doors, they're more or less all just on the same side, just arguing for their own special interests, whether that's their own personal interests or their own business or their own stakeholder interests. There's no such thing as real parties. It's just everybody fend for themselves, basically. And when the party calls on you, you follow the party line. But most of the time, you're working for yourself.
No, well, and that's one of the things that's fairly obvious in the Parkes electorate, where I'm based, is we have like a Liberal national coalition. Now, the National Party was traditionally designed to support the country. Now, the Liberal Party was initially, a concept to support small business and business in general, finance, economic growth, jobs and growth. It's still the same bloody slogan they've been using for 60 years. But what we've got is, if you join those two parties together, there's no way that they can look after their constituents. Like, there's no way that as a coalition they can support the city and businesses and economic growth, whilst at the same time making sure that the environment's catered to, the farmers are looked after, and the people have fresh, clean drinking water in the country, because all the interest gets put around the population points. And those centres then, like magnets, absorb all the resources and that do come from government, and there's no room left. And see, what I read in Ricky Muir's comments was that, you know, all these things are set in stone in behind the scenes. Like, they know how it works. They know that they can't make changes, even though that they might tell the media they can. But they sort of, everything's a preset agenda that we're not even privileged to. We don't know what their end goal is and where they're aiming to take the country.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, we don't have a seat at that table. We enter in at, you know, very low down the bottom of their considerations, if we measure into their considerations at all, and that's hence the creation of our party. So, you know, we know exactly what the Australian people want, and that's exactly what we do. So it's sort of the balance, I suppose. Whilst they're looking out for themselves and their mates, all we do is look out for Australians. And somewhere in between those two, using the Westminster system, is where we will end up, and hopefully that is a more balanced place to come from.
My 2019, like in 2017, we got an election in 2019 on the federal level. My prediction is that we're going to go to a referendum prior to that on the Republican issue. Malcolm Turnbull's one of the biggest Republican movement people. The Liberal Party's expressed a pretty strong support of the entire Republican movement, and it's a great draw card for another early election at some point where they think they might be able to get through, you know, on the back of a Republican vote. But I don't know whether the people are ready to change ship entirely while this one's currently sinking.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting play. Although they have, you know, Turnbull has shown that he likes to throw his hand down and risk it. You know, with the whole double dissolution thing, that was a bit of a gamble. And I mean, let's face it, he only scraped through very, very marginally on that. He might try and do the same thing again with the Republican thing. So, you know,
well, it all comes down to the terms of reference around the Republican issue. So if they develop a very stringent set of guidelines and rules that will dictate the way the Republic will work in Australia, then you can quite easily see the developed contention could be around those issues in a Republican debate. It gets stalled in Parliament. All of a sudden he says, well, you know, winner takes all. If the people voted in, like a double dissolution situation, once again, he gains a massive amount of support if the Republicans are behind him. If not, he pretty much loses the election guaranteed. And I don't know who we'll be looking at as Prime Minister.
Donald Duck.
Yeah, well, look, to be honest, when was the last time you seen Bill Shorten in the news? I haven't seen him in months.
I was just talking to someone today about that. I said that Labor's just sort of sitting back, letting the Liberal Party destroy themselves. That's the easiest way of doing it, I suppose. And let's face it, the Liberals did it with Labor years ago. They just sort of sat back and went, "Oof, we're just going to let these guys, you know, pull each other to pieces." And every now and then they threw in a bit of an antagonistic approach with you know, corruption in investigations. You know, they'd throw something up, and then it'd take the Labor Party 6 months to regather themselves. Now the Liberal Party have enough money to clean their act up a lot faster than Labor did, and to, you know, disguise what they're doing and distract people from the nightmarish situation that exists within the Liberal Party at the moment. But it's certainly still happening with Liberals. And, you know, the moral high ground that the Liberal Party had 10 years ago, 15 years ago, has not only dissipated, it has reversed. You know, they are, if not worse than if not as bad as the Labor Party, they are worse in almost every way.
Yep.
So,
like we said, it's the same party. It's just different sides of the same coin. And
yeah.
I think Bill's playing a smart game at the moment. Like the Liberal Party are more or less throwing hand grenades up in the air and playing catch. And Bill's just watching them go off like firecrackers. And like you said, coming out, I do remember he came out the other day and made a statement about the Centrelin debacle. And his position on that is that it's too tough on some of the poorest people in the country to be throwing this kind of attack on them. But I think the Liberal Party are doing quite a good job of destroying themselves. Like you said, they're not, at this rate, they've got no intention of winning the next election.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they try and pull it back together, put it back on track.
Well, they're the master manipulators. Anything's possible.
Absolutely, especially when you've got the MSM on hand to do your bidding.
Yeah, well, that's it. Nothing's too hard for a party with that kind of monetary reach. And like there's a clip actually making its way around YouTube at the moment with Rupert Murdoch back in the I think late 70s, very early 80s, stating in a documentary that was made about him when he first took over the Australian newspapers. And he comments in it how much fun he's going to have playing with Australian politics. And it's like comes straight out of his mouth, not a qualm, you know. Oh, it's a great joy to play around with, you know, the country's politics and government. And that was his intention in monopolising the media here. And to hear it out of the man's own mouth is kind of surreal. It's like, really, you actually do think that way. I just imagined that it was by circumstance you ended up here and it just all of a sudden, you know, oh shit, I can make changes if I really wanted to. But no, he knew when he started taking over the media, he knew we had very relaxed ownership laws. He understood our legal system probably better than most people in this country understood our legal system. And he has made the most of it ever since. And he's a very wealthy man, probably because of some of the governments he's put into power.
Oh, for sure. No doubt about it.
But that pretty much wraps up that's an hour. We were probably going for 30 minutes, but since the video stayed good, it's been good. I'm hoping that anyone who has tuned in, it looks like it says here we have 2 viewers. I don't know if anyone's watching through Facebook or anything like that, but it's
got to start somewhere.
That's it. I think we can call this one a success. We'll watch it back and see how it pans out, and I guess we'll leave it there until next week. I'll just stop the broadcast and we'll talk to everyone later.
Okay, mate. Awesome.